welcome everybody to our live with John Howler. John, welcome to our live program. We're going to have a great time today.
Hi,
How are you? How are you?
Okay.
Cool. So you ready to roll?
Yep.
I mean, there's an awful lot to talk about, right? But folks, we keep promising that we'll take your questions. So today we're actually going to take your questions. So remember to put the word question in all caps, and then we'll take it from there. And we're going to get ready to roll. But just to get everybody wound up a little bit, Google has an AI, or Google AI, excuse me, says that if you are calling communism evil, it is harmful and misleading. So this is just more of that. All right, you're going to have to fall into the category of what we tell you that what you can say. So we know this is coming with AI. John, we did that program last week, which was terrific. I want to ask you this. Oh, Pookie says something already. Wow. Tom and John, you ready?
Yep.
Tom and John, do you see the USA totally abandoning Israel's welfare? Pookie from YouTube.
Well, I assume by that she means
It's a he. Pookie's a he. Pookie Martinez.
Okay, he.
I've met
sorry.
Pookie. Hey, Pookie, by the way, I'll be in Huntington Beach tonight with Joe Pettick and Brandon Holdhouse, just so you know if you want to show up. Okay, back to you, John.
I got the identification of Pookie wrong. I'm sorry. So I assume by that Pookie means, will the U.S. government totally abandon Israel?
That's what I think, yeah.
And the answer is, I think that's going to be endemic, a problem with all governments pretty much around the world. So I would assume that the U.S. will continue on that road. The question is, I'm sure on everybody's minds, is what happens with the U.S. election? Will that, if Trump was reelected, would that change things? And I don't know, Tom. I mean, I have problems with the basic premise of the Abraham Accords. I'm not opposed to peace, but I also have a problem with the Jared Kushner written and Trump endorsed peace to prosperity plan that they released in January of 2024, which clearly divided the land. And I had a question the other day when I was talking about this on my update. Somebody said, well, isn't the land already divided? And I'm like, yeah, the land is already divided, but don't divide. You want to divide it even further. There really was a two-state solution early on. It was Jordan for Arabs and Palestinians, and a Jewish state of Israel west of the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. And now they want to create a state in Gaza, and then they're going to want to create a state in the West Bank, and maybe so it's not really a two-state solution anymore. It's a 3 or 4 state solution. But I would expect, with the way that our government is going and the influence of Obama and the administration, I see very little going on there that's encouraging, other than they still seem to be supporting Israel a little bit. But we just don't have that much influence anymore anywhere. It seems like that's a little bit hard for Americans to wrap their head around. So I just don't know how the election is going to go. I think that the support from the Trump administration will be stronger, but still what I would characterize as tepid. I mean, I'm watching, Tom, like, the mega Republican channels and that type of thing. And there's not a lot of, there's a lot of people who are no fans of Israel at all in that group. So there's supposed to be a merger of anti-Israel, anti-Semitism on the far left and far right on both sides of the political spectrum.
I look at it and I'm watching what's coming out on the right, and there are so many people like Candace Owens and others that are saying, hey, why are we even giving any money to Israel?
Right.
Which is so strange coming from a Candace Owens, or, Tucker Carlson's definitely not a fan of Israel. And you listen and you hear these arguments, you're like, well, wait a minute. Regardless of what your thought is on Israel, without a strong Israel, the entire Mideast would be, it would always be a massive war going on. They're the only ones they are the peacekeeper within that entire region. Saudi Arabia knows it. Their communities know it. They know Iran's a huge problem without the U.S. support of Israel. But we see everything going this way. And, if you look at America will, the day is going to come, it will officially back out of supporting Israel. It'll be official.
If America is still around at that time.
Well, then it won't be there to support Israel.
That's right. That's right. So it's I just think we have a lot of problems. A lot of issues here in the United States.
We do. In fact, I'm going to be talking quite a bit about that this coming weekend at the conference over in Florida. It's going to be rather interesting. But yeah, America's in so much trouble. And we see the end of America. And I just got to go on the record and say this, John. I know we've said it probably 100 times before. I had Reagan on yesterday, Dave Reagan.
I saw that, yeah.
And we all see the end of America based on the Bible, but we can see it. It is just rapidly imploding from so many different sources, not to mention the nefarious people that are in our own government and in media and everywhere else and running cities and states. But when I look at the destruction of Babylon, I know we've said this many times, John, the destruction of Babylon, Revelation chapter 18, that's at the end of the tribulation. America's going to be gone before the end of the tribulation. America's not a player during the entire tribulation period. So
it does not appear to be, unless it sort of melts into or gets, if not destroyed, but it just sort of gets
swallowed up,
melted into this final beast empire.
Which it very well could be, but it will not be the superpower that it has been, and we can see it's the glory of the United States is definitely fading from the world stage, and it's fading rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on, like in the Red Sea. The Houthis seem to be running roughshod over the United States, and they're out there touting that they took down a $32 million U.S. drone with a $10,000 missile. That's a pretty good return on investment. And one of the issues you have is, why don't we just bomb them back to the Stone Age? But Yemen's one of the poorest countries on the planet, and part of them live like it's still the Stone Age, to be honest. But they have these drones supplied by Iran. So it's kind of asymmetrical warfare, but I don't understand why we can't engage. And, we have this big powerhouse ability to borrow all kinds of money that we don't have anyway. Why can't we be putting out asymmetric warfare on our own? I mean, that's the way warfare is going to be. So why don't we change with the times, I guess, is the thing. And I don't understand that. Well, but it is changing.
It is changing. I mean, we have this guy who lights himself on fire the other day, who, in the U.S. military.
Died for a lie.
Yeah, for a lie. And I watched the video of him as he's walking to the place to light himself on fire. And going, these people are deceived, but at the same time, we have this type of thing within the U.S. military. And at the top of the U.S. military, we know there's generals that are not supportive of the United States of America. So when we see what's going on with the Houthis, and speaking of this, here's this report, John. I don't know if you saw it. The Houthis knocked out, I guess it's 4 underwater cables that link Europe to Asia in the Red Sea. Did you see that?
No, I've not seen that.
Yeah, that's rather interesting. 4 underwater communications
Where did that come
cables.
from, by the way, just so I have reference.
Let me pull that up for you. Give me just a minute. I knew I should have had this ready before. It came from, ready? I'm almost there.
Oh, I see it in the New York Post and some other places. So
yeah, there you go.
And the Jerusalem Post.
Jerusalem Post is where I got that from. Thank you. Yeah, that's a Jerusalem Post. So we see that. Let me ask you this, as you think about that in your head, because you managed to be able to think about 2 different things at the same time. By the way, Zach is in the chat room. Hi, Zach. And looking forward.
Zach.
Yeah, Zach's great. Wonderful. Okay, Ezekiel chapter 39. Francis asked this question on YouTube. Who are the isles or the coastlands? Ezekiel 39, chapter 6. What are your thoughts on that, where God says, I will send fire on Magog and on those who live in security in the coastlands or the isles, then they shall know that I am the Lord. Do you have any thoughts on who that might be?
So let's back up a little bit about the what Ezekiel 38 is talking about now. So I think you and I both hold to a more traditional view that it's Middle East centered and it's countries coming from the north that are attacking Israel at this, whenever that is, whether it's within the 70th week or outside the 70th week, we don't really know yet. I think our friend Bill Salas would say that it's at least 3.5 years before the 70th week starts, right? I think that I don't want to misrepresent Bill.
I think so. I don't want to misrepresent him either. And I talk with Bill a lot, but just to give everybody a frame of reference, the position would be if the weapons are being burned up for used as fuel.
7 years.
For 7 years, and they're in Israel, yet Antichrist comes into power and wreaks havoc on Israel during the second half of the tribulation period. Well, how could you have Jews burning the weapons for this?
So there's 3.5 years
prior to
that, and so then you would have to go 3.5 years prior to that to give them the full 7 years.
Correct.
And I'm not so sure that we're kind of off topic here on the question a bit. The 3.5 or the 7 years, I don't know that it can't extend into the millennium. I don't think we really have a good grasp of exactly what the start of that millennium will be. There are some people who think that the new heaven and new earth come at the beginning of the millennium. I think David Hawking would be one like that. Doug Hamp, I think, is another one. I heard an interview between them probably 10 years ago where they talked about that. So that's a question, and we don't know exactly what all's involved in this millennium. I mean, people, the promise to the redeemed is they'll be ruling and reigning with Christ. So that implies that there's some kind of governing work that needs to be done, and we know that Jesus will rule with a rod of iron. So that one view is that it's 3.5 years before the 70th week or tribulation period starts. Another view would be that it's early on in the tribulation period. I think that would be more of a view of a Chuck Missler or somebody, that it's like it happens about 40 days after the beginning of the 70th week, because that allows the ending of the sacrifice and offering, and then there you get into the 2300 controversy we don't have time for. But so one view of Ezekiel 38, invasion of Israel from the north with this coalition of countries, plus some North Africa, Turkey, Russia, Magog. I think it's the Islamic empires of Central Asia will also be involved in that. And then another view that I think is a more recent view is that the invasion that's talked about there is an invasion of America, and he will come up from the north, come up over the North Pole, and that's where the missile attack will happen. And we have some friends who hold to that view too, I think. And again, I don't want to misrepresent him, but I think Doug Woodward was one of the ones who postulated that. But so then we get to the question that was asked about the coastlands. Who are those who dwell among the coastlands in safety? And it seems to be a far off people. And I think you could make the case that that might be referencing America in that part of Ezekiel.
Mm-hmm. And if that is a reference to America, America obviously is very insignificant at that point, if it's just referenced as one of the lands of the coastland. As I would say also is when you have Sheba and Dedan and the young lions of Tarshish, I don't think that's America, but some of our friends do. And again, it's even if both those include America, America is exceptionally insignificant to have such a small reference without anything else included in there. So, but I have more questions for you. Do you want to move on to another one?
Let me just say, I think that when we identify these regions of, Gog, Magog, Meshach, Tubal, Rosh, Sheba, Dedan, Tarshish, it's easy to kind of get lost in the weeds of, for example, a lot of people say, well, the Arabs, they're not really descendants of Ishmael because there's no records or anything to prove that. They're not Edomites, and we don't even know that the Jews are the Jews. I think that what we have is, at the end, is at least these surrounding countries. I think it's better to look at what those geographic regions, the identity that they had at that time will be the identity that they have at the end. So Sheba Dedan would be clearly Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
But the coastlands and safety is kind of interesting because America is a very unique country because we have pretty defensible borders, assuming we used to have defensible borders, but we have two oceans. We have long coastlands, the big oceans in between us and people who would potentially be our enemies. So that could be a reference to America.
Yeah, it is possible, but still, it's a very small reference. Okay, you ready for another question?
Sure.
The coming eclipse. Yep. Do you see any significance in the coming eclipse? That is from Kristen Weiss, who asked that on YouTube. I'm going to ask Pete Garcia this
like
too.
That question's designed to get everybody mad at us.
Probably. I am going to ask Pete Garcia that. He's on with me later on today. I'm going to ask him the same question.
I wonder what Pete's view is, because I think Lee Brainerd put something up yesterday, and he essentially says it's nonsense.
Yeah. I'll see. Pete wrote an article about it a while back, I remember. I'm curious to see what Pete has to say.
I'm not sure I'm ready to stick a flag and say that it's nonsense at this time. And listen, my house is in the path of totality.
I thought so. I thought it was.
Yeah, that's April the 8th, although I'm looking at the extended forecast and it's supposed to be cloudy and rainy all the way. I looked at all the main sites in Ohio and it's supposed to be total cloud cover and rainy. So then the question is, sort of like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody is around, does it make a sound? Is like if a total eclipse happens in Ohio and nobody can see, is it really a sign of anything of God's coming judgment? I don't know. And I don't mean to minimize those people who are concerned about it. And Tom, you should see my mail.
I get mail too, so I believe.
I got a very long letter and brochure and everything about this eclipse, and it's clear that this is a sign of God's judgment. And I don't know that I need an eclipse to say that God could be pouring out judgment on America for the way things are going by and large in American culture. When our largest pop icon is probably engaged in witchcraft and satanic rituals on stage, and all of that is celebrated in our major entertainment media. It's pretty easy to say, God's going to do something to America. So I think the eclipse thing to me is you have to kind of wait and see. But listen, I have a lot of friends who think this is it. This is a sign, this fall, this is a sign that this fall there's going to be major judgment in America. And the answer is, I don't know that yet. I mean, a lot of people have been making a lot of prophecies about that for a very, 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 very long time.
Gets a lot of views.
And that's right. I mean, so if I say, well, I don't think it's going to be, nobody's going to watch that. But if I say, oh, this is a major sign, then I might get more views on YouTube. But I don't do that to get views. I try to speak the truth. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure.
Okay, so you and I.
What do you think?
I'm gonna tell you. I think that it's America's in trouble. I would fall into the category of a John Haller. Let me go back into my prophecy.
I never had my own category before. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, you know what? I like to think I can think my way through things. You're quite the thinker. But if I go back 20 years in Bible prophecy, I would get caught up in lots of things, blood red moons and that kind of stuff. And then I started to look at some things and realize, well, wait a minute, a lot of predictions are in this circle almost come up like astrology charts. You can almost say anything and you'll eventually make it connect. This is what I do know. Apart from an eclipse, you don't need an eclipse. I know that God is going to judge America for its immorality, the abortions. I mean, we can go right on down this massive list. What we're allowing and celebrating happening to children right now. I mean, we can make a long list of sins that Judah committed and was judged by God for, and Israel committed and was judged by God for. And our sins are far greater than what Judah or Israel did. And to think that we're going to get a pass is crazy. I can look at the economy and think, okay, so we're trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in debt, and we keep printing more, and to think nothing's going to happen out of that. And when I look at the pages of the Bible, I don't need an eclipse to tell me this is what's coming. In fact, I preach Bible prophecy based upon what the Bible does reveal to us and say, this is what's coming. So, yeah, and granted, a lot of our colleagues that will talk about the eclipse and the X. I don't know what Pete's position will be, and I'll ask him. I find it interesting, but I'm going to throw something else your way. So,
well, can I just say one thing too, because I think now I forgot the point I was going to make. So
okay, well, think about it. You're going to be able to think about it again. On April 9th, you and I are scheduled to do a live stream. That's the day after.
Right.
So we'll have some. I've thrown this out. I've thrown this out probably every year for the last 5 or 6 years when it comes to Rosh Hashanah and
Right.
Feast of Trumpets.
I was born in the 50s, so I call that Rosh Hashanah now.
That's pretty funny. So anyways, now you threw me off. But every year I tell people, look, will you come back when I don't say the rapture is going to happen on this particular date? Will you at least come back and apologize to me a week later or something like that? In all the years I've said that, not one person has ever come back and said, I'm sorry for calling you names and cursing you out and telling you the blood of the world is on your hands because you didn't say the rapture is going to happen on that date. And I would say this same thing. Listen, judgment is coming. I believe we've already started this process. We've been turned over to a reprobate mind. I mean, look what our leaders are doing. Look at what you were just talking about with the occult practices that's being celebrated everywhere. You know, you look at these things and go, how blind do we have to be to think
so
we aren't living in this?
So here's the point I was going to make. So we have guys, I mean, there's been guys around like David Wilkerson gave a very famous sermon. I mean, when was that? 30 years ago?
I think it was longer than that.
It could have been even longer than that. It could have been 40 years ago, about the coming judgment on America. And there have been other ones. And my question is, so they said that, but the base of their message was America needs to repent of its sins, by and large. And that's a message that a lot of us have been preaching ever since that time. And my question was, so the picture of what happened to the kingdom of Judah before the Babylonian captivity is a pretty good picture, I think, of a pattern for what's going to be going on in the church as we approach this final period of human history. And my question was, I mean, we knew there were prophets like Jeremiah and even Ezekiel to some point delivering these prophecies, but I don't know that they were associated with signs in the sun, moon, and stars. But I also think that those might be significant. So 7 years ago, 6.5 years ago, we had the September 23rd sign, you know, with the Virgo baby and this and moving through this.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
And there's some people that I remember I talked to one guy who had a video up that got millions of views about that. And I can tell you that he's gone completely off the rails since. Okay. And I love the guy. I spent hours on the phone with him. And I'm not going to mention his name. I think people can figure it out. So there were a lot of people. I mean, there were people putting up videos about that. They got like 9 million, 14, 15, 20 million views. And so I don't know, Tom. I feel like if I didn't get it, okay, I didn't need that to tell me that America and the world needs to repent before God's judgment is coming. Now, it is kind of interesting timing, though. The September 23, 2017 sign, the 7th anniversary of that will coincide with the Summit for the Future at the UN in New York. And it could be, and I have friends who say that was sort of a first shot warning from God about what's coming. And we've had a 7-year period now to kind of like in advance of the final 7-year period. That's how some are teaching it. And I can't say that they're wrong. I mean, I think a lot of these things in Bible prophecy, they happen, and then we could say, oh yeah, that's how that was going to work out. So, but I'll be interested to hear Pete.
Yeah. Well, Pete definitely thinks through things. I know he's written an article or two about it. So looking forward to having that conversation with him amongst a few other things.
We can tear it apart if we don't think it's good.
So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be at 2:00 today. Okay. So with that, I mean, we can tell that judgment is coming. And when you look at the Old Testament prophets, some of them were 100 years before judgment came. They were warning judgment's coming. But we can look back at in American history, there were preachers almost 100 years ago that were saying, listen, judgment's coming and we better repent. I think it was Peter Marshall said that. And others since then, even before Peter Marshall, they were saying that. So it's in recognizing how much further along this path we are. Okay, let me move on. So Cindy from the website, Cindy Hark says, I understand we can't be dogmatic, but it's Gog and Magog at the very end of the tribulation period. John, I think you and I both have a similar position on Gog Magog. I am, the Bill Salas thought does resonate with me too, because it is a little bit of a challenge sometimes for me to get over that in my mind. But I've traditionally put it in the beginning of the 7-year period, somewhere around where Missler put it. But what are your thoughts on the Gog?
I think there are 2 wars of Gog and Magog. So some people say that Ezekiel 38 and 39 is a prophecy that will only happen at the end of the millennium. There's some differences, though, in that John in Revelation, when he's talking about Gog Magog at the end of the millennium, doesn't make reference to all of these other countries. So what you would have to assume that if John is just recounting Ezekiel 38 and 39, you're going to see, and they take the verse that in Ezekiel it says Israel will be living in safety. Well, they're only going to be living in safety during the millennial period. It'll never be a safe period before the end of the millennium. And I have to tell you, right now you're looking at what's going on over there, and you think maybe that's the only time that they end in peace. I mean, do you ever see them going back to September 6th? And the answer is, it doesn't seem like it would be rational, but they might.
Back to September 6th?
Yeah, like they were living the day before October 7th. I mean, back to October.
Okay, I got you.
The 6th.
So, well, I look at the Bible. I think it's pretty clear that there's going to be a false peace and security in Israel.
Right.
Definitely when Antichrist comes. We know from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, even though you and I both disagree on the timing of the rapture, clearly when they say peace and safety or peace and security, then sudden destruction comes. So there is, we find not just that passage. We know that during the tribulation itself, Jesus, when he's talking to the Jews in the Olivet Discourse, as it was in the days of Noah, and then Jesus gives the description, they'll be buying and selling and planting and so forth. So you have a time of not just normalcy that's coming, but a time of strange normalcy in the sense of this peace and security that people are going to seem to think we finally have arrived. So I do think that is coming, and it's probably coming sooner than a lot of people think. And then also, here's another one, John. Jesus also said that in all of the discourse that these events are going to come at a time when you do not expect. So you start looking at things going, well, right now, a lot of people are on edge, but you start looking at what's coming. So I think there's some very interesting things that could develop, especially when the fake peacemaker arrives, Antichrist. And so anyways.
So there's a guy named Tony Garland. You can go to Spirit and Truth and look up the article there where he writes about it. And I'll just tell you what he says. He gives like 3 reasons why Ezekiel 38, 39 is not the same as Revelation 20. And I think these are correct. The Ezekiel takes place before the kingdom is established on earth, the latter after the kingdom. Ezekiel, the invasion comes only from the north, but in Revelation, it comes from the 4 quarters of the earth.
Yeah, the whole globe. Yep.
And then finally, the rebellion of Gog and Magog and their destruction in Revelation 20 marks the ushering in of the eternal state. But in Ezekiel, it is preliminary to the millennial kingdom on earth, because in Ezekiel, what follows Ezekiel is the millennial temple passages of Ezekiel 40 through 48.
Yeah.
So which some have a process like the waters of the Dead Sea becoming sweetened from the river that flows from under the Temple Mount down through the crack in the Mount of Olives. And that's kind of interesting because, again, that's one of those prophecies that it happens over a period of time. It doesn't happen instantaneously.
Yeah.
So we have to, and that would seem to require part of the millennium, which would take me back to the earlier question about the weapons burning for 7 years. There's a transition phase even at the beginning of the millennium.
Yeah, I totally agree. They're separate events. And she did ask also if it's at the end of the tribulation period, not the millennium, but I'll just answer this real quick because we got to get to another question.
Okay, I thought you meant at the end of yeah.
Maybe I was wrong, but David Hawking.
It could be at the. I think it might be later in the 70th week period.
Okay,
myself.
and David Hawking believes
that way more.
David Hawking taught it's at the end of the tribulation period.
He did for a while, then he changed too, I believe.
Well, he didn't change when I had him in a Q&A with me one time. He got actually mad at me in front of like everybody. I was like, wow. And I just said, well, David, your book says this anyways. I don't want to digress and go that direction.
I think he's, listen, I've known David for a long, long time. And he's changed some of his positions. I mean.
Well, I told him, I said it's okay to change your position, but anyways, we'll leave it at that. Andy Woods has Ezekiel 38 in the beginning, Ezekiel 39 at the end of the tribulation. So there are differences of opinion, and we can't be dogmatic about it, but they're all interesting. So Tina Marie, here's the next question, says from YouTube, during the millennial reign, will the people in their mortal bodies see or know that we are in immortal bodies? I believe yes, we're reigning as kings and priests with the Lord, and the Lord is ruling with a iron rod. And also, they're going to see Jesus in Jerusalem. That's what I believe. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I look, it's going to be a different time, and I think they'll know us. But remember, even when Jesus was in his body, it's kind of interesting. They still had the scars that they could see, and they could. It took him a little while sometimes to identify him till he spoke, which is kind of because he was badly marred in his face. And I personally believe that that's going to be like one of the things that survives in the.
John, can you hear me? I lost your audio.
Go ahead and keep talking.
Okay, now I can hear you. Okay. So I'll tell you, can you say something? No, I lost you again. Okay, so anyways, so John is, as John's getting rehooked up, just real quick, I want to mention this. I find it interesting too, that when you look at Jesus as he appears, it appears to us in eternity that we still see his wounds. And so when we look at him and you start thinking, what's the one work that man has done that we will see in heaven? It's going to be the work of the wounds from him being put upon the cross. I would imagine not just the wounds in his hands and his feet, but his side, maybe from the crown being pressed upon, the crown of thorns being pressed upon his head. Imagine that Jesus would have those wounds for all of eternity. And by the way, the Bible also doesn't say as a lamb who's scarred, it says wounds. So will they actually be wounds and not healed scars? Very interesting when you start thinking about that. By the way, while we're still waiting for John, I'll be in Orlando this weekend. We're going to be there. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. For those of you who are already registered to attend, I know it is sold out, but the live stream is still available. And listen, I encourage you to join us for the live stream. There are absolutely some terrific speakers that are going to be there. I believe there's 18 or 20 of us that are going to be speaking there. Brandon, Billy, the usual suspects with me. Alex Newman's going to be there. I think first time ever he's going to be at the Millennial, at the Prophecy Conference, the Summit in Orlando. So join us for live stream. John, are you?
I think I'm back.
He's back. Okay, John, you're back. Let's roll.
Yeah. Now, what were we talking about?
You were just talking about the wounds that Jesus had.
I mean, I think it's one of those things that sort of survives into because I think it's like the sacrifices. They're memorial, but I think that the one person, this is my view, I've taught about this a number of times, that one person is going to kind of look a little bit weird, maybe Jesus, because of the scars on his face. And you'll never look at Jesus during that whole period of time and not really understand what it cost him for you to be there.
I agree.
That's my personal opinion.
That is my personal thinking also, that he appears in the future in the Bible as a lamb who was slain, and we'll see his wounds. So I agree.
And by the way, you go to all the post-resurrection appearances, there were a couple things. They seem to have trouble recognizing Jesus initially. Like,
you're right.
They weren't sure. Like the disciples on the road to Emmaus, they got a Bible study for hours as he walked. By the way, I think that they went to Bethel, where Jacob had that dream about the ladder, and Jesus identified as the ladder in John chapter 1. But that took hours for them to do, and they didn't recognize Jesus till right at the end. What was going on there?
I agree. Hey, by the way, I know I'm going to Israel. I'll leave like next week. You and we're doing this next week live, but after that I'm leaving for Israel. I'm excited. Guess where I'm going? Be'el.
Going to
Be'el.
Are you?
With we're for everybody out there. That's where the vision of Jacob's ladder was, and to be able to go there right now is pretty cool.
You should go over to I-2. It's only a couple miles
if
away.
I can't. So it depends, because they don't really want you traveling there, but I got the green light to go over there, so I'm pretty excited. And I was told by our friend Roddy that there's unbelievable things that have been discovered there. So he goes, "You've got to come see him." So,
and I think Joel Kramer's book talks about Bethel as well. And I was there with Joel a few years back. So it will blow your mind.
Apparently, even since then, like as real recent,
right
things since you've been there. So I'm going to have another one up on you, John. I'm going to make sure I can get that.
Well, that's not fair, but
I got to get
for you a little bit.
I got to get you over there with me, because we would have a blast, especially with Joel Kramer and Roddy. We'd have a blast. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, I have another program I got to go do.
Okay.
All right.
That's okay.
So,
it's 70 degrees here. I may go play golf.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Hey, I was in Minnesota the other day. It was like sunny out. And it's not sunny where I am, but it was sunny there. That was pretty cool. So, do you have any final closing thoughts for everybody?
No, I really appreciate everybody asking the questions. I hope we answered some this time.
And we did. We got some.
Filibuster. I think it's one of these things where we're in that Daniel 12, Daniel 11 stage where we're at the time of the end. I think the book is starting to be unsealed at the end, and we need to be paying attention and the wise will understand and instruct the many. So we all want to be people that are wise. You got to stay in the book, but you need to be paying attention to what's going on around you.
Yep, both. I wholeheartedly agree. You don't want to be like the other category of Daniel chapter 12, where the wicked will see it and they won't understand. No, and we're wise because we're people of the book and we're paying attention. So thank you, John. That was a blessing. Always a blessing with you. I can't wait to see you next time, next week. And I can't wait to send videos to you from Israel. I'll try to do something with you while I'm there, and we'll be able to put it on YouTube for everybody too. I think it'll be cool. Okay. All right, everybody. 2 o'clock today, I'll be with Pete Garcia, or Pete Garcia will be with me, and I'll ask him about the eclipse amongst some other things, because the billionaire class, did you know this? John, did you know the billionaire class are selling all their property in the States and they're moving to New Zealand? They're getting, did you know that? This is wild.
Pete sent me that article yesterday.
Yeah,
so I looked at it.
It is.
I mean, it's a time to.
It is interesting. So we're getting
time to sell. The market's up, so why not take some of your profits?
New Zealand, I'm thinking, I was just there. So I was there with Pete, so we're going to have a great time, 2 o'clock today. Anyways, thank you, John, for joining me. And thanks, everybody, you can find John at Fellowship Bible Chapel. You're going to be super blessed by John's messages. I always am. I love listening to John, even if I just want to argue with him after we're done. But always a delight. And always learning. And thank you, John. You're such a blessing to me, a good friend.
Thanks, Tom.
And I will see you all later.